Hey guys, welcome back to the Coffee and Cartridges podcast. Today we're going to drink some coffee and talk about the top 10 most influential cartridges of all time. Stay tuned. All right, now this list today is probably going to be not what you're expecting. So don't misunderstand this. Don't think I'm giving you the best cartridges of all time, most popular cartridges of all time, but the most influential. And so this is probably going to be a list that you don't expect, and probably some things talked about on this episode that you've never heard before. So hopefully it'll be interesting. We're going to do these in the format of oldest to newest. So it's not a top 10 as in we start at 10 and we go to 1. But we start with the cartridge who had the innovation at the earliest date up until the most modern. Now, first of all, I want to say I am not an expert. I could be getting some facts wrong. I could be missing a cartridge. And so if that's the case, please let me know. I'll be happy to correct it or talk to you about it in the comments. And just be prepared for me not to possibly talk about your favorite cartridge, because I'm coming at this from a certain angle. And though I might love the cartridge you love, it might not be what I'm referring to as influential. All right, some obvious things out of the way. When I say cartridge, I'm talking about a metallic cartridge where all components are housed within one thing, one vessel. It's the bullet, it's the powder, it's the cartridge case, and it's the priming mechanism. So there's been tons of innovation in guns and ammunition for hundreds and hundreds of years before even the first one on my list happened. You can go back to the wheel lock and the flintlock and all kinds of awesome muzzle loaders. But these are innovations to metallic cartridge design. Okay, without any further ado, let's start. Number 1 is the 22 short, back in 1857. Now that probably threw you for a loop because you're expecting only rifle cartridges, but the first few on here are pistol cartridges because a lot of things started there. So what's so interesting about the 22 short, and why am I bringing it up? So technically the first metallic cartridges were pinfire designs. I can show you a picture here of some pinfire cartridges. But that's nothing that lasted. It has no meaningful impact for today. The two designs that do have an impact is a rimfire and a centerfire. The technical first rimfire cartridge ever was a BB cap. And this BB cap literally just took the percussion cap and put it behind the bullet. And the percussion cap, the priming mechanism, is the only thing causing it to ignite. There is no powder. So we can just kind of skip all that. But the first metallic cartridge, where all those components are housed together, including powder within, shockingly, I didn't know this till I did the research on this, is the 22 short. And what's cool is the 22 short is around today. I've seen it at Walmart. It's not super common. The 22 long rifle, of course, is the most common, but there are a lot of shorts around, and there are still rifles that will shoot short, long, and long rifle. Number 2, I'm almost positive you've never heard of it, but it does have something about it that's very influential. It's the 56-46 Spitzer. Now, the 56-56 Spitzer was developed by a man named, you guessed it, Spitzer, during the Civil War. In fact, the story goes he went and proposed his cartridge and rifle to Abraham Lincoln. It wasn't the main rifle they used, but it was a rifle that was used. And then a little bit after the Civil War, there was a few iterations, and one of those iterations of this 56 Spitzer was a 56-46 Spitzer. So I'll show you a picture of it right here. The thing about this cartridge that means something is it's the first bottlenecked cartridge. Now, I will say that there are some other ones around the same time, and so maybe I'm getting them mixed up. I'm pretty sure it's the first. If it's not the first, it's one of them. But this is one of the first times, if not the first, we've ever known of a cartridge, a straight-walled cartridge, to be neck down. Going back to the 22 short up until this time, there's been several rimfire cartridges, all straight-walled. But in this case, it was bottlenecked. Now when you bottleneck something, you have the same amount of powder going through a smaller hole, which increases pressure, therefore increases muzzle velocity. So this was a significant thing. Now, I don't know the whole history behind this cartridge. It's not really common. I don't know if he was well aware of what he was doing or if he just stumbled upon something here, but going forward, there would be a lot of bottleneck cartridges. And even though there are straight wall cartridges that are popular even to this day, definitely the momentum and the direction of modern rifle cartridges is for a bottleneck design. All right, next, here's another one that's a little fuzzy on the history. It's the .44 Smith & Wesson American that came out in 1871. Now, what's so awesome about this? I believe it's the first centerfire metallic rifle cartridge. There are some other cartridges from England a little bit before this, the 577 Snyder and the Martini, that potentially beat it out by a short amount of time. It appears, however, though, that the metallic part of the case was just literal brass foil and paper wrapped around the cartridge holding it together. And then after a few years, they did convert it to actual drawn brass. But at the beginning, it definitely had brass foil and paper. But I'm not 100% sure that it's possible I'm missing something, but I believe that this .44 Smith & Wesson American in 1869, it might have came out in 71, is the first centerfire cartridge. Now, I think I said rifle cartridge. It's the first centerfire cartridge. This also came out in a handgun. So I didn't mention this, but the 22 short came out in Smith & Wesson's original handgun. And this .44 American also came out in a Smith & Wesson handgun. Now, just a few years later, you're going to have the .45 Long Colt, which is going to come out in 1873, and it's going to become way more popular. But in the years leading up to it, before the .45 Long Colt came out, you did have the .44 Russian and a few other .44 caliber cartridges, but I believe the first was that American, and I think it has that designation as the first centerfire cartridge of all. And then also in 1873, not only did the .45 Long Colt come out, but the .44-40 came out in their rifles in the 1873 Winchester lever action, and therefore it could be considered the first centerfire metallic rifle cartridge. But best I can understand, the .44 Smith & Wesson is the first centerfire metallic cartridge. All right, we're gonna jump forward to a really big one now. And this, if I did rank these in order from 10 to 1, this would probably be number 1. In 1886, the 8mm Lebel. Now, I'm gonna show you a picture of this cartridge. It's an interesting looking cartridge. They had an 11mm cartridge that they just simply necked down to 8mm. But the thing about this cartridge that's so important is the powder. So everything we've mentioned before now, the .44, the 22 short, and all them other cartridges, they were all black powder. But the French, in 1886, developed smokeless powder in a burn rate that could be used in rifle cartridges. And this was a big, big advantage. So not only is it smokeless, therefore not having a haze of smoke around you, blocking your view, but smokeless powder can get to pressures nearly double that of black powder. So it's a huge leap forward. Now, the rifle cartridge, once again, not that big of a deal. They just necked down an 11mm French infantry round. They also took an existing rifle they had and just basically figured out a way to make it withstand higher pressure. So they were under a deadline and they just kind of threw together a gun and a cartridge from existing, parts and pieces that they had. So it's not the design of the cartridge so much, but it's that powder. So the 8mm Lebel is the first cartridge to ever have smokeless powder. And this caught on like wildfire. And within 10 years, basically every cartridge had smokeless powder. The only ones that didn't would be if you were still hunting with a muzzleloader for just traditional purposes. But that's not all. Not only did they develop this smokeless powder, which spread to Germany and Russia and the United States and Sweden and Norway and Japan and Italy and everywhere else. Everyone had a smokeless powder infantry rifle cartridge now. They also developed the Spitzer bullet. And in 1898, so everybody at that time had a cylindrical bullet that was pretty long, and it had a round nose and sometimes a flat nose, and then the back of the bullet was definitely flat. Well, the French decided that if we point this bullet, and that's what Spitzer means, really just pointed bullet, if we slowly taper this bullet to a point, and on the back side of the bullet, taper it also to a smaller diameter than the actual bullet, giving it a boat tail design, it's going to be more aerodynamic and more streamlined, and it's going to retain its energy and velocity better. It's just going to perform better. And so in 1898, they replaced the original bullet in their Lebel with a Spitzer boat tail bullet, which once again set the world on fire. And within 5-6 years, everyone had Spitzer bullets. So 2 different times, the 8mm Lebel basically, just flipped the industry upside down with very innovative ideas. Then next on the list, 2 years later, Germany took that design, the smokeless powder design, and they created their 8x57, we call it I or J, but it's for infantry. Just their standard infantry rifle. Now, it was smokeless, but it did something that no other cartridge, to the best of my ability of knowledge, had ever done before, and that was it was a rimless cartridge. The Lebel and all these other cartridges before were all rimmed cartridges, but this one was a rimless cartridge. So I'll show a picture of the head design on the screen now. Now this head design, you've probably saw it before because it's on your 30-06, it's on your 308, it's on your 6.5 Creedmoor. It's on a lot of modern day cartridges. And not only is that rimless version on a lot of your cartridges, that exact head diameter of .473 is on a lot of your cartridges today. Everything in the 30-06, everything in the 308, everything in the Creedmoors, it's all coming from that head diameter and that rimless head. So big innovation there. Next up, in 1915, Savage came out with the 250 3000 Savage. Now, what was so spectacular about this 250 3000? Well, the 3000 in the name denotes the feet per second. This was the first cartridge to ever reach 3000 feet per second. So it's just a cumulative effort from the designers to figure out what components to use and how to put this cartridge together to get that level of velocity. And if you look at the case, it starts with that same head diameter of the 8mm, the .473, also on the 30-06, and then it has quite a bit of taper down to a 25 caliber bullet. But they were able to get it very flat and fast shooting. So this started something where they all want to, take the next step and go a little better and go a little faster and get a little flatter. And the flatter your shot gets, the less you need to know drop. And the further out your maximum point blank range becomes. And the more accurate you can be, and the more, the further distance you have while hunting. So this was a big thing. All right, 5 years later, Savage came out with the 300 Savage. They took their 250 3000, that 250 Savage, they necked it up to 30 caliber, but they did a lot of changes. They blew out the shoulders a little bit. They made the shoulder angle a little bit steeper. And this would be things that P.O. Ackley and Roy Weatherby and several other designers would do later. But really, Savage was the first. So I consider this the first really modern cartridge in its design and the way it's implemented. So their goal was to, get the performance of a 30-06 in a much shorter, smaller case, similar to what the 308 would also do later. But unlike the 308, they really didn't get close to that. But the design philosophy was there, and a lot of the things that they did have been copied since then. So big innovations there in kind of a modern case design. All right, number 8, 5 years later again, in 1925, Winchester came out with a new bolt-action rifle, pretty much a copy of the 1903 Springfield, which was pretty much a copy of the 1898 Mauser. But it was an awesome rifle, and it was called the Model 54 Winchester. And they also came out with a new cartridge called the 270 Winchester, which was simply the 30-06 neck down to 27 caliber. Or you could say it was the 30-03 cartridge, the predecessor to the 30-06, neck down. You say, really, you have the 270 on here, what did it do? Well, to the best of my understanding, it's the first cartridge that I know of that was rated at a pressure of 65,000 psi. In our modern day, it's pretty common that cartridges will come out, 62 to 65,000 psi. And especially all your magnums and all your PRCs and everything today are all 65,000. But for many years, it was not the case. And especially back in 1925 with the metallurgy at the time and just the construction of rifles, that's a high pressure rating. It just shows you that Winchester was proud of their Model 54 rifle. And they knew that, speaking of flat shooting like with the 250 3000, this could take that flat shooting to the next level. But they had to have the speed. They really had to push the velocity. Therefore, they designed it with a max pressure rating of 65,000. And really, it and the 22-250 for a long time was the only two that did that. But since then, there's plenty. So it's a very common thing today. But as far as I know, it was the first. All right, next in 1963, Winchester also came out with a 284 Winchester. Now the 284 Winchester in itself was kind of a failure. Even though it spawned things like the 6.5 284, the 450 Bushmaster, the 6.5 and 338 Weatherby RPMs, it in itself, in the hunting world, in the commercial world, was not a tremendous success, even though it did complete its mission, basically to get 270 performance in a short action. Now in the long range shooting world, it has become a huge success. Even to this day, it's very popular. It and its child, the 6.5 284, have had a lot of success in F-class and long-range target shooting. But the thing about the 284 that I'm putting on this list was its design. In my opinion, it's the first short mag. It wasn't called a short mag. It wasn't called the 284 short mag. So, we've had a lot of short action ultra magnums, Winchester short magnums, the 6.5 PRC, the 6.8 Western. There's plenty of cartridges today that are short, fat cartridges, and they're called short mags. But that 284 really was the first one. The width of the case is definitely wider than a 308 or a 30-06 case. And so you can basically get the same case capacity in that shorter 284 as you can in, say, a 280. Might not be exactly the same, but it's very close. So I think the 284 was way ahead of its time. It was marketed poorly, and just the implementation from Winchester was not the best. All right, and the last one, in 2007, Hornady came out with the 6.5 Creedmoor. Now, the 6.5 Creedmoor has become a love-hate cartridge. You either absolutely love it and think it's the greatest thing of all time, or you can't stand it and you don't like anyone who likes it because it became very overhyped. And I agree, it became overhyped. However, it's a great cartridge. And so the thing with the 6.5 Creedmoor that puts it on this list is the fact that they took things you would do in a custom rifle and the way you might go about creating a load or a certain rifle chamber for a match grade, application, and just made it the standard in all their factory rifles. So it had a lot to do with how the chamber was cut. Most rifles have always had not a sloppy chamber, but just a chamber with enough tolerances that you can feed properly and never have any jams. Plus, every manufacturer is going to have slightly different tolerances, and you just want to make sure you come up with something that's not going to have any issues in anyone's rifle. But the Creedmoor came out with a design, this is really for target shooting, and let's just have a really tight chamber in there where it doesn't have a lot of play, it doesn't have a lot of sloppiness, and therefore that should lead to, accuracy and consistency. And if you're a reloader, we've always wanted to seat bullets out as close to the lands as possible, as long as it's safe, and then back up a little bit and try to find that sweet spot with seating depth and figure out where it likes it. And most cartridges, before the Creedmoor, the bullet was stuck pretty far down in the case. Once again, just to be safe, not to create pressures in case one manufacturer's chambers, the head height's a little different than another one. Just to make sure that everything's going to be okay. Kind of push that bullet down in there. Or the other potential would be they extended the case so long, like in a 300 Win Mag, to try to fit into a standard action that there's just no room for that bullet. And so to get extreme case capacity in a limited space, you have to sacrifice something, and they would sacrifice the bullet sticking out and just kind of cram that bullet in. But the Creedmoor design from the beginning was, let's give it plenty of head height and seat that bullet out really far out there, not taking up case capacity, and just getting it closer to the lands. And let's have those tight tolerances. And let's make sure that all the rifles come in a really fast twist rate, because we know with the 6.5 caliber that people want to shoot those 140 plus grain bullet weights to get the high BC bullets. And a lot of people for years, including myself, were having gunsmiths build rifles with faster twist rates than you could get from a manufacturer. If you want, it was always a 1 in 10, 1 in 12 twist rate. And so you could never shoot the heavy, high BC bullets. So Hornady had a great idea. Let's make all the barrels have a fast twist rate. Let's have plenty of head height for that bullet. And let's have tight match grade tolerances in the chamber. And let's make sure every chamber is cut like that. All those are tremendous ideas and really kind of have set the tone for this whole century. And, even the 6.8 Western, that's not a Hornady cartridge, basically did all that with a 6.8 Western. So it really has set a new standard when it comes to how to set up a rifle's chamber and barrel and focus in on precision. Now that's going to conclude it. However, I am going to throw out an honorable mention. It's the 277 Sig Fury. They've developed a tri-metal case, a stainless steel head, brass body of the case with an aluminum locking washer that's able to withstand 80,000 PSI. So that could become the next really big innovation. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video and just listening and talking about rifle cartridges and thinking about some cool designs from the past. If you have liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. That really helps. Leave a comment if I've screwed something up, if I've made a mistake, if I've left something out. If you totally disagree with me or you agree, whatever your comment is fine. Leave a comment. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe and check the description below for some links and other things like that. Hopefully you have a wonderful day, and until next time, take care.